News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Beres.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Beres here on a Thursday. And I think we've got a very interesting show on tap that I hope you'll join in the conversation with, and I suspect we'll get some calls because it's something a lot of people are going to talk about. Of course, you know, this past week was the funeral, and very somber, and I thought quite a memorial for a fallen officer, Metro Officer John Anderson. The question in the aftermath of that now is the prosecution, and there you see him, and there's so many photos of him and the memorial, and just a true public servant who loved his job and leaves behind a small child. Just a tragic, tragic, tragic case. And he'll always be remembered, and you never want to forget, you know, the folks who die and the victims in these cases. Well, the suspect now, Jayona Brown, she's a 17-year-old, and she is charged right now in his death. The question for a lot of people is whether or not she'll be transferred and tried in adult court. And that's part of the larger question of what we're going to be talking about this morning with our guest is, how is that determined, whether or not a juvenile is transferred, and are things changing, and why does it happen one way or the other? And to talk much more on that is someone I think who is much more versed in addressing these legal issues than me, though I'll say I've learned an awful lot from this guy. Can you guess who it is? I'm Nick. This is Nick Squared.
Hey,
Nick Leonardo, legal analyst. How are you, Nick?
I'm all right, doing well, thanks.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Well, I know you followed these stories, and by the way, you know, we all know her name now, Jayona Brown, 17. She's been in juvenile court. Why is it you suspect, and I don't know, maybe they don't always do this, the name was released, but we don't have a mugshot of her. Why do you think that might be? You
know, I think you might have more experience in that. I know that if it's an A-level felony, that the media is allowed to get the mugshot and put it up there. So I'm not quite sure why there's not necessarily a mugshot, probably because she is, in fact, a juvenile, and it's not an A-level felony.
Okay, so it's not an A-level felony,
not
which is charged with right now? It's
correct.
not. I think that's the answer, Nick. That explains it. So we haven't been able to get that yet, but a lot of people now, if you post, and I did post on my Facebook page, and you know we've asked people, if you say publicly here in Metro Nashville to the general public, should Jayona Brown be tried as an adult, 99.9999% of the people out there are going to say yes. Some of them, just because they're so darn angry about this and they hate what happened to this good officer, different reasons for it. But that's not an open and shut case, is it?
No, that's exactly right.
Why is it? Why? And she's 17. I mean, she's almost 18.
Right, right. So, you know, we have the statutory scheme the General Assembly set forth, and we have what's called the Juvenile Transfer Statute.
Okay.
And so the judge, in this case, it would be Judge Calloway here in Nashville.
She's the juvenile court judge.
Correct. She would conduct a transfer hearing to determine whether or not the charges should be sent to adult court. And it's kind of complicated. It's very specific, but essentially, if you're 14 or less and you commit or allegedly commit first-degree or second-degree murder, then that's eligible. And if you are up, I believe it is 14 to 17, if you commit an A felony, which would be some kind of especially aggravated robbery or some kind of rape or something, you're also eligible. And if you're 17 or older, you're eligible. If at the time the offense was committed, and the judge will have this transfer hearing, the judge will have to weigh certain factors to determine whether or not to try this person, to have them sent into adult court or to retain jurisdiction in juvenile court. And one of the factors, amongst some of the factors they look at, is the prior history, whether or not prior attempts at rehabilitation have been unsuccessful. And it's clear because the juvenile transfer statute ends with the legislature saying, we don't want people transferred to adult court simply because that jurisdiction doesn't have resources there in juvenile court. So the goal is rehabilitation. And can they be rehabilitated? But of course, at 17 years of age, almost 18, I would think that it would probably be transferred. But the reality is that vehicular homicide is just not a serious crime in and of itself. I mean, even if she is transferred and convicted, it doesn't carry a lengthy prison sentence. Yeah, we need to address that. There are some people saying, well, she needs to be tried in adult court and convicted and sent away. Some people saying for life, which, by the way, is absurd. This is not first-degree murder. It's not second-degree murder. Look, my belief, and I think the prosecution's belief would be, she did not go out that night meaning to kill this officer. Which is like there is no disputing that. She did not mean to. Now, should she have known what she was doing is dangerous, stupid, and irresponsible? Absolutely. But she did not go out there, with the idea of intentionally killing this officer. Had she, and they could prove that, that would be murder. Sure. I mean, that could be, first-degree murder, premeditated intentional killing of another. But in this particular instance, I don't know enough about the facts, but where we see this quite a bit is drinking and driving.
I was going to bring that up.
Someone speeding down the road at 80 miles an hour and they're on some back road and they're intoxicated and kill some folks in a car. I mean, that's going to be vehicular homicide, and that's one of the many laws I think that the General Assembly should take another look at. I mean, it doesn't need to carry a life sentence, obviously, because you're not intending. Right. You're drunk or you're intoxicated, but the law as it is right now, I mean, if she were convicted just of that vehicular homicide, she may end up doing maybe 3 years, something like that, before she would be eligible for parole or release. But that's the law, and so that's something the General Assembly should take a look at. It's one of those laws that needed a second look, I believe.
I think you're probably right on that. I've seen cases where there have been DUIs where someone has been killed, okay? And the person was just so irresponsible and drunk out of his gourd, and he was out with his lawyers or whatever in less than a year. Something like, I don't know what they worked out, but he did no time. He killed someone.
That's right. He
killed someone. Now, he didn't intentionally go out saying, I'm going to kill this person. But I agree with you. You're thinking that, look, if you're going to drink half a bottle of whiskey and get behind the wheel, okay, you have to know that you have turned yourself potentially into a deadly weapon. And you should know that there should be a problem there. And whether you intended to kill someone or not, you should have known that was a possibility. So the punishment has to be a little stiffer.
Well, and I think that if it was, your mother or my mother that had a glass of wine at dinner and accidentally had a car accident that was fatal, I think that's different than having a BAC or a blood alcohol level much, much higher. So I think you can tie the increased penalty to the level of blood alcohol. But again, I'm not trying to suggest that that's the case with Ms. Brown. I don't know enough about the facts to know if she was intoxicated. But nonetheless, I mean, it could be something that she was just, irresponsible any way you cut it.
And I was going to address that. We're waiting to find out. I mean, the rumors are flying out there whether or not Brown was drunk or under the influence behind the wheel. Now, because this was an accident that involved a fatality, she did go to the hospital, okay? And if there's a fatality, they automatically take blood. Sure. They don't have to ask your permission.
Correct.
They take your blood because there's a death in this case. So they've drawn blood. It's at toxicology. We're going to know if there was anything in her system. If it comes back that she was under the influence, do you believe that increases the chances that Judge Calloway will transfer her to adult court?
Well, I don't want to read into what Judge Calloway or any judge is going to do, but I can say that that factor is something that is not helpful to her, by wanting to stay in the juvenile system, Okay. And I think one of the big benefits of being in this juvenile system with her, I mean, it's not that lengthy of a sentence on the backside in criminal court, but your juvenile record would be sealed. And so essentially you really wouldn't have any felonies, so you would move on about your life, in the juvenile system. It's one of the advantages.
And no one would know about it. And that's the thing. We didn't know initially about any priors with her because it's in juvie, but her own attorney publicly indicated that there had been some issues with her in the past. So, and I think that's what gets a lot of people here. I think we understand that when a young person commits a crime, maybe one not as serious as this, you want to not just throw them in adult court, forget about them, and just make them wards of the state for the rest of their lives. You want to try to rehabilitate them. The problem is when someone just keeps committing crimes and they're given chance after chance after chance, and they keep recommitting. That's where I run out of patience. Say, you know what, you've had your chance. I don't care if you're 15. You've already been in trouble 3 or 4 times before, and now you go out, get behind the wheel, and kill someone. You've run out of strikes. You're out. Boom, gone. I don't understand that. I mean, it's almost like there should be a 3 strikes and you're out thing. Chances are one thing. How many do kids get?
Well, I mean, I think the other thing that you have to look at too is, we want to turn these children into, tax-paying, hard-working adults.
And I don't want to pay for them behind bars the rest of their darn lives.
Correct. Yeah. And we don't know the family dynamic and the situation from when these children come from. And I'm not trying to make excuses for behaviors. Okay, but if you grow up without a mom or a dad, things are probably a whole lot different in your life than it would be, if you had your nuclear family unit intact. But again, this is something I believe the General Assembly needs to take a look at. What programs are available to these children in the Juvenile Justice Center right now? What's going on over there? What programs do we have to better these children? If they're sent to Woodland Hills out there off Briley Parkway, again, what programs does the state have to try to rehabilitate these young people so that we don't see them back in custody? Because I don't think that for most of these children, probably 95%. I mean, they're really good kids that are misguided and need some guidance and assistance. And what would you rather spend the money as a taxpayer? Right. I mean, I understand what you're saying. You're saying there's just, you're a bad apple, let's forget about you. Yeah. But we can either spend that money in incarceration, okay, which is going to be continued incarceration, and at some point they're going to get out with no skills, or do we spend it in trying to rehabilitate these young people?
Oh, and I'm in for it. Don't get me wrong. I totally agree with you at that point. But let's remember, you've got to balance it with public safety.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's the issue. You say, well, we don't want to give up on this kid, and we don't want to send him to adult court or give him a sterner penalty under the juvenile system. And then they're out and they're recommitting. And to give you an example of this as we go to the break, and we'll talk more about this. And I want you guys to fill up the phone lines and tell me what you think. But the teddy bear teens, all right? The teddy bear teens, as 2 or 3 weeks ago, there were 5 teens that were arrested by Metro Police. You may remember this story, and we had the photo of it. We may be able to show it to you later. But during a search of their property, they found loaded semi-automatic weapons hidden in one of their teddy bears, along with marijuana. Well, okay, you figure pretty serious crime for 14 and 15-year-olds. Okay, I don't know what happened in juvie court, but yesterday 2 of those kids that were arrested for that case were obviously back out and about and were just arrested for grand theft auto. All right? Something's wrong with that picture, folks. We'll take a break. When we come back, the number 737-7587. What do you think in terms of juvenile crime? And as I think Nick's correct, you balance public safety with rehabilitation. We'll be right back with more right after this.